Welcome to AO On Air. This is a podcast from ActiveOps, allowing us to present you topics ranging from operations management, leadership, technology, and new innovations. Check out all our episodes on YouTube channel AOTV or with your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple or Spotify. Now let's begin.
Hello and welcome to AO On Air. My name is Michael Cups and I'll be talking with three of our colleagues down in Australia today. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to tackle the potential management in economic times, in tough economic times, that is. So I'll get to the audience in just a moment. Just a reminder, AO On Air is sponsored by ActiveOps, and you can find us on AOTV at YouTube, or you can go find us on Spotify or other channels to listen to other episodes. So welcome to the guest. Jane, Rosalie, and Martin, hello, how are you?
Hi.
Very well, thanks, Michael.
Great, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. I know it's early your time, but we appreciate you getting up early and joining us, and looking forward to the discussion. So why don't we start with just a little bit of setting. We've been talking with senior leaders around the globe. We've also done a global survey of leadership and employees in the continents of Australia, the UK, and North America. And we've gotten some interesting facts, and we want to continue to ask the same questions because it's interesting to see the different perspectives, either regionally as well as just the uncertainty that we all have with certain economic conditions that could be thrust upon us, et cetera. But let's start by getting to know you. Why don't we start with you, Jane? Could you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, no problem, Michael. So, Jane Pretty, I'm a relationship manager at ActiveOps. I've got, I'd say, 20 plus years leadership experience, ops leadership across multiple industries. So I'm talking retail, banking, insurance, and wealth industries. So a lot of experience there.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today, Jane. How about you, Martin? Some people may remember you from the last time we chatted.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Look, I'm currently doing the customer relationship director role across Asia Pac for ActiveOps, and similar to Jane, I've had operational experience in most banking disciplines: retail, corporate, institutional, business banking. So. It's been about, I think I said last time, several decades, Michael.
Yes, exactly. Well, welcome back. Good to see you again. And Rosalie, you'll have a bit of an Australia and South African experience for us.
That's right. I'm originally from South Africa. I worked in a bank there for 16 years, and I've been working for ActiveOps for the past 6 years, of which 3 years I've been in South Africa and 3 years in Australia.
Excellent. Welcome. Well, good to see you all. So I think, we'll start off just asking the obvious question. So have you managed, and all of you have a lot of experience, have you managed through tough economic times in the past? I know the pandemic we've all lived through that and worked through that in the recent years, but if you could think a little further back, anything, Rosalie, can we start with you? What do you recall in your history?
I have a very interesting memory of the 2008 global recession. I was a team leader for about 2 years when the recession hit. And the first bit of the recession was really tough because we didn't expect the complexity that came with the recession. There was a significant increase in volumes and lots of overtime that had to be worked. And I remember how it felt on the floor working with the teams about you didn't know what to expect. The second half of it was really interesting in that we had an executive who was a sponsor, and he decided that he was going to bring in a structured operations management process. And that happened in 2009. And you could see the before and after of what that ops management process did in the business. So it was ability to start looking at volumes in a different way, not just looking at what happened and reactively reacting to it, but structured forward look planning, as well as understanding what happened historically and how that will influence what's going to happen going forward.
Excellent. Well, very good. That's interesting. And the two sides of the coin there that you experienced as well. It'll be interesting. I look forward to asking you a few more questions about that in just a moment. How about you, Jane?
Yeah, I think 20 years experience, it's unavoidable, I guess. Like I've probably, off the top of my head, I think 3 significant events, and you think about that every 7 years, you tend to experience one. I think, September 11 was the first one, and that was pretty big because everyone in Australia, and I guess the world, but particularly Australia, and at the time I was managing superannuation. So you can imagine everyone was very scared of the future. Well, you pretty much felt like there was no future. So no one wanted to invest in the future. So work pretty much dried up at that point, and that was a really difficult time. The global financial crisis was a little bit different from Rosalie's experience to mine. It was a flip of that. It was actually in Australia, we kind of managed to avoid that. And I was in insurance at the time, so there was a bit of money to spend, but it still meant there was, a bit like Rosalie, increased volume, so having to deal with that. And then probably my most recent 2018, where APRA really cracked down on lending criteria. And what happened for us, so I was in mortgages at the time, and we had this strategy, and it was today's work today, which was great at the time when that was created. However, what did happen when APRA cracked down on lending criteria, the work dried up. So today's work today, we had pretty much 50% less volumes and nothing to do. But we had strategies around that, which was great. So we worked through that.
Yeah, interesting. We're seeing interest rates in the U.S. go up yet again, and so I think the banks are feeling that pressure that there's just less people applying for loans in that regard. So
correct.
Yeah. How about you, Martin?
Yeah, so certainly been through all of the above. I think the the one that sticks in my mind is probably the 2008 one. There wasn't just certainly uncertainty around the global economy, but also the social economy, and I think that created a really interesting dynamic because there was pressure from all parts. So I think that was particularly interesting from a what did that look like perspective. People were stressed, I think, with all of the world events going on. I think the bigger issues around work, centralisation, process improvement, centralised areas were becoming more centralised, if I could say that. Lots of things were being consolidated. There was lots of uncertainty around, what does good look like, and dealing with all those issues, I think, created a lot of complexity.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's interesting because we probably will get into the discussion about how the employees are affected, but they're still there to work and do a job, but they still have the same anxiety that other people have. So we'll get to that. So why don't we start by going just around and talking about it? There's been there's been a while, as Jane mentioned. There's probably 7 years since some people have seen a tough time economically, and so either new people in the workforce or maybe people that were on the front lines of the workforce that have been promoted up weren't in more of the planning phases of their role. They were just executing. So I'd like to ask each of you if you have a few bullet points or ideas for those young managers, leaders, and operations of how they should either plan for or prepare for tough economic conditions. Martin, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, look, managing performance is really key. So I think really understanding how people are performing and what sort of support they need is absolutely critical. I think if you don't understand that, you can't necessarily set the vision and set the the stretch and the challenge to the team, and also the team will start to develop cracks because it'll be carried by a few and participated by many. But I think the other one, Michael, is quality, and quality is it's an essential aspect because at the end of the day, it is a massive drag on capacity when things are getting done twice, 3 times, 4 times. In these times, you just can't afford to deliver a substandard quality because you just don't have the time to do it.
Yeah, very good. Good points. Rosalie, you want to go second?
I think in times of chaos, which is associated with any kind of crisis, it is important to create consistency. And that consistency, I always talk about the McDonald's of operations management. And that is, if you order a Big Mac, everybody knows, irrespective of which country you're in, what a Big Mac, they know what to expect from a Big Mac. And that should be the same in operations. So understanding that the terminology, the performance, the KPIs, and talking the same language, it is so essential just to create that bit of consistency for leaders.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Excellent. Jane, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Rosalie. I think consistency is important. So that whole structure and rhythm, you tend to, I guess, when you're experiencing something different, throw away everything you know, but stick to what you know and keep doing it. Keep doing what you always do is really helpful. Control and focus, I think, is really important. Like there's a lot happening that you have no control over. So just stick to what you can control and focus on that. I think that's really useful. Support and patience is key for yourself, your people, and, utilize your peers to do that. I think that's important. You need to look after yourself. And I think opportunities for me is because with all adversity becomes opportunity. So there's always, do you know what I mean? I kind of like to think that with everything bad comes good.
Yep. Yeah, excellent. And, I was thinking a little bit before this that you guys kind of had chaos. I think one of you used the word chaos and tragedies. And you Australia was dealing with wildfires before the pandemic, and then the pandemic was right on the heels of that. And I think one of your customers, I think it was CoreLogic, had a wonderful quote about just being able to have the data and being in control as you kind of went from one tragedy to another tragedy, if you will, or chaos to chaos. But all good points. Thank you so much for those bullets. Let's dig into it a little bit. And Martin, you and I spoke a couple of months ago, and that podcast was published, and you hit on it then. We spent some time talking about the cost and quality balance and getting that right, and you kind of hit on quality again here. And rework costs you more because not only you get potentially making a customer upset, but you also have to work it again and again. So, could you share a little bit about how to plan for that cost quality balance that you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's understanding quality, and it's understanding the impact that quality has on on the capacity that you've got in terms of the people that you've got to work with. And it's really important, and it's sort of interwoven with some of the discussion that Jane and Rosalie have had around standards and consistency. To produce good quality, you do have to have good standards. You do have to check those standards. You do have to be curious about how people are performing their role. And yes, that does take time and energy, but the impact of that is absolutely massive because if you spend 15 minutes doing a process confirmation, for example, that may save you actually doing 3 hours of repeat work because you have to do several things time and time again. So it really is just understanding the level of quality, the target that you want to set in terms of what good quality looks like. And we always use the example that good quality on a plane flight is 100%, but good quality on a mortgage process might be 98%. Yeah. So it's really about making sure that you find that balance and you create the room for your people in the plan to get it right. If you set productivity levels too high, and if you set the pace too high, you will see the adverse impact coming out the other side of things getting done wrong and having to be done again and again and again. So finding that consistency and that balance, and it's sometimes not about always bettering yourself, but having a more consistent and a more stable environment sometimes rings true.
Yeah, that's interesting. And consistency came up twice. I think, Rosalie, you mentioned it in the customer example of when you order a Big Mac, you expect to get a Big Mac, and it's consistent with your past experience. And Jane, you mentioned some about the employees' inconsistency. Can you talk a little bit more about that, either one of you or all three of you, maybe not at once, but each at a time, that consistency. So I'm guessing that involves, for your customers, being able to consistently deliver on time. And as Martin said, the quality has to be there. Let's start with the customer, and then let's go to the employees maybe.
So for me, the consistency, I guess, was around, so that structure and rhythm, that was around sticking with, your buzzers, your framework, your buzzers, your planning, your review meetings. So your load, your variance, sticking with all of those, because what isn't consistent during those times is your volumes, right? So you might have 4 years of historical data that say you should get X amount right now, but in the current times that has just been thrown out the window. Like your new forecast could be totally different, right? So if you've got consistency and you stick to the process, you will quickly understand what that forecast now looks like, and you can plan for that.
Yep.
And then that gives a consistent outcome for your people, because they're following that consistent process. They know, okay, what I'm getting is different, but what I need to do is the same. And then for your customer, back to what Martin was saying before about that balancing, if you get that new forecast, you know exactly what you're going to get, and you can match your people to that work, your customer will then get that consistent outcome that they're looking for. So that whole experience of for service and quality.
Yep.
I think that's really important.
Excellent. That's and you're spot on. And Rosalie, you had the Big Mac example, so let's talk about that with the customer. Customers expect, whether you're getting a service from a bank, an insurance company, superannuation, as Jane mentioned, they expect quality and they expect the same outcome for the request. Do you have a perspective on how to deliver consistency?
Well, I think it all starts with employees. They need to know and understand what they are talking about, how they are processing, and operations as a whole. So if we think about how people interpret a word like productivity, everybody has a different version and understanding of what they see productivity to be as. But the moment you align everybody to have exactly the same understanding of all these things and KPIs in the operations, it makes it easier, because you're driving in the same direction, and that's how you deliver for your customers. But it also helps team leaders and managers to be able to manage in the same format, so have the same good practice or best practice, and follow through with that. So it creates that consistency within leading a team, which is really difficult when people are vulnerable and people are suffering from anxiety because of what might be happening at home. A lot of the time, in order to manage those volumes, a lot of overtime is worked, and that really distresses staff members and employees through the process, and increases absenteeism. So that consistency of knowing what you can control, and then only running around for that 10 or 15% where you have a variance, makes a massive difference within the business.
Yeah, so you hit on something there around overtime and anxiety and stress, but you also, I think it was you earlier said, have support and patience of your employees. I think that was one of the three of you mentioned that. I'm curious, is it better forecasting and planning? Is it just better daily interactions? What is there? Maybe it's all of the above. But what is it, Rosalie, that you think is kind of really important to provide that support and patience to your employees, especially today with hybrid work and things like that, where you may not see them in the office?
I think it's consistent communication and structure. So being available and having an understanding of when to be available. So if you have those structured meetings, providing a consistent ops management approach, that means that they know where they need to be and at what time. It also creates that opportunity of having data available to share insights, to do proper planning for your staff members and sharing those plans and insights with the teams.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, it's a great point. Sorry, Michael. I just wanted to reinforce that. I mean, the employees, they have the known unknowns, right? They know the environment is going to be all over the place. They know it's going to be, the variances and the variables of how work comes in these times is going to be, it's going to be manic. But to have a process and to know that the people that are managing that process actually have a way through that and actually have a consistent way through that, and they see that happening everywhere across their peer group, I think is absolutely critical, because then, what seems like an environment that is out of control actually becomes an environment that is being controlled with peaks and troughs.
Yeah. And Jane, you mentioned, and as well as Rosalie mentioned, that volumes might increase depending on the scenario. And so let's talk about the managers in the middle there, right? So we talked about helping to support you and be patient with your employees. As a manager, you see volumes increasing, and you've got a lot of work to do, but you also may have some stressed employees. And so what are some best practices or advice for managers in that? And maybe we've already said it, but we always tend to talk about senior leadership and employees. So let's talk about the manager for a little bit.
I think for me, what I said before, it's about leveraging your peers. So you making sure that because you will feel it, right? So when you're a leader and you're out there and you're dealing with it, it's a bit like you're a duck on a pond. So you just, on the outside, you're just floating around, you're taking it easy, you're in control, but under the water, your little legs are going 1,000 miles an hour. So you can't sustain that, right? So utilize your peers, do it away from your people. And there's plenty of opportunities to do that. And when we talk about AOM, when you talk about your load like your LT buzzers, your load meetings, your variance meetings, these are all opportunities where you can sit down and you can share. You can share with each other. So not only how you're feeling, but also experiences. So someone might have an idea that you could actually utilize that might help you, and vice versa. And it's not just ideas, but it's also the work. So you can guarantee your volumes might be skyrocketing, but elsewhere in the business, they might be actually dried up. So there's support there, but you won't know that until you come together, and it's important that you do that in those meetings and share with each other.
Oh, that's great. That's a great point. And Martin, I don't know if you have thoughts on that in particular, but that seems like, when you start looking across departments where volumes may go up in one area, they may go down in another.
Yeah, absolutely do. I think it's got to be a pretty selfless time, Michael, and I think managers, for the benefit of the customer, really do have to understand what are my number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 processes, and then use that in a way that is quite purposeful in terms of executing against that. You might have skill sets spread across the different areas that you can prioritize and deprioritize that will actually get the work done in the way the customer needs it to get done. And I think, getting that consensus and getting that solidarity across, across the group that is managing that particular area or areas is really critical. And so, yeah, sometimes you do have to put your own, your own perfect service aside for the benefit of another area that will obviously felt more if it falls over.
Yeah. And so I don't remember who said it. I wrote it down. Somebody said, take the opportunity when we're in tough times to take it further. And two questions come to mind. So you all three of you have talked about when you have systems in place, stick to the systems that you have. What if you don't have a system in place? Is that what you mean by take the opportunity, or is it something else?
It's probably a bit of both. I would say, yeah, if you don't have a system, get a system, AOM. It's easy, it's consistent, it's great. So if you don't have AOM, get AOM. And then secondly, for me, the opportunity, how you have a list of things, that the nice to-dos that you've had, and you've probably had that for months, literally, right? So there's the opportunity to actually attack those lists. So For me personally, when the work dried up, we really had to quickly, because Martin mentioned before about performance, because if work dries up, performance suffers. So, and engagement suffers as well. So you quickly had to look for opportunities where you can address that. So things like we gave opportunities for our people to go and explore items that they had on their individual development plans, but
Right.
elsewhere in the business, right? So we could free them up to go and explore those. But rather than backfill, what we then created was a group of casuals that we then utilised by levering up or down. So part of our load process with our work, we would pull these casuals in when we needed them, and if we didn't need them, then we didn't have people sitting there doing nothing. We also did, because I at the time managed a print and mail function, and we had all this old collateral sitting in the mailroom that hadn't been sorted for years. So we had that, and that was a massive risk, because one of the things you aren't allowed to do when you work for a bank is send out old collateral. So that's actually a breach of compliance. So we could sit down and go through and throw out all this old material and make sure we had new material in there. Things like process maps, process documents, all of those things that you don't get time to do, now you've got plenty of time to do.
Yeah. Rosalie, did you have a thought on? Yeah.
Mine was the flip side of it. So in my experience, it was normally that there was more work and not enough people to do the work in. If you think about the increase in recoveries and debt collection, significantly increased, where you had a situation where some teams were really, really busy and others didn't have enough work. The problem is that people weren't skilled, so you didn't have that flexibility to move people around. And that was one of the key things that I have learned is essential to focus on, is creating that flexible staffing solutions. Like in JP's example, they had that group of casuals, whereas it potentially could be lending and borrowing between teams to help them for the peak periods. Because we know when chaos happens, budgets gets cut. So there's no additional recruitment going to happen. So you need to make the best use of the current employees that you do have, but it's about empowering them so that when they go to another team, they can perform, they have the capability and the skill set to be performing where they want to and should.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Martin, I want to get your response to that too. But first, I want to mention something to you. Hopefully it doesn't change your answer. But I just saw a study that Gartner did of CFOs in large institutions and what their short-term plans were in case of a economic turbulence. And you can guess that. Figure out a way to cut wages and outsource work, right?
Yeah.
But they also asked them what the things were that they would invest in. And one of them was the top three. I think it was the third of the top three was invest in existing capacity, which feels like what you guys have been talking about. Martin, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely do. I think the cost of actually onboarding somebody into an organisation is significant, and I think like everything, these times go in cycles, and it will go full circle or half circle, and you will need to return back to what normal used to be. So retaining those people and retaining those skills is critically important. So if you have the opportunity to re-skill somebody and apply them to another part of the business that could actually benefit from that and retain them, you'll get a win-win, because you'll create certainty for the employee, but then you won't have to invest in those retraining costs I was referring to. I think the other critical part to invest in is also the forecasting piece, because the more time you can get yourself to a point where you can deliver better certainty, and you're not making these decisions on the day, but you might be making them a week before or a month before or a quarter before, depending on how good you can get at this. I think is really, really important as well.
Excellent. Well, that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is Capacity 22. Obviously, as the vendor that's hosting Capacity 22 in Melbourne coming up soon, it's showing our new innovations, and one of those things is kind of smart planning and forecasting, ML-based forecasting and planning. But it's going to be at anybody care to tell us about the venue that it's going to be in Melbourne? Maybe we can get a little plug for the site, and then we'll talk a little bit about the fun and why people should go.
Absolutely. Look, I can certainly share. We're going to hold it at the Metropolis in Melbourne, which is really exciting. Personally, I've never been there before, but really looking forward to the conference. It's on the 24th of October, and certainly open to all of our existing client base and potential people that are interested and want to understand a little bit more about us. So really excited about the conference. I think it it brings together a group of people that are like-minded and really want to learn and improve through understanding the experiences of what we have to offer, and certainly their peers across industries have to offer.
Yeah, it looks
it's
good.
In a prime
that?
Position too. Prime position overlooking the Yarra River. So it's lovely.
Yeah. Well, I see that the attendance is already booking up there. It's really good to see. I mean, the minute we announced it, we started seeing registrations. So it sounds like it's going to be a fun event and a full day. It's one day, so the commitment is really a day. It's like you said, sharing ideas with peers, and you'll see some new stuff from ActiveOps. You'll get to meet the ActiveOps staff. You'll get to meet peers in other banks, and maybe some from your own banks and insurance companies and so on. So very good. Well, that's exciting. Yes, it's been a while since you guys had an in-person event, huh?
Yeah. I can't even remember the last time we had one.
Got to dust off the clothes, the nice clothes, huh?
Back in the day.
Very good. Well, any closing comments or thoughts about managing during turbulent times or anything else?
I just think we've spoken a lot about like investment in the people actually doing the work, but you really need to invest in your leaders. I think we often forget. It's like we put people in an ops leadership role, and then we tend to think, oh, there you go, you'll know what to do. But it's a bit like giving someone the keys to a car that's never driven in their life. You actually need to teach them. And that's why I think the AOM method is perfect. It's an investment, it's a framework, it's a process. And if leaders follow that, you cannot fail. So my number one advice is invest in your leaders. Don't stop.
Good advice. Rosalie, any final comment?
Well, seeing that JP is talking about cars, I'll give another example of a car. So we all drive cars, and we know that a car needs to be serviced on regular intervals, and that is exactly the same with operations. So Just remember that you need to stop, reflect where you are at the moment, repair what needs to be repaired, service what needs to be serviced, and then you know that it's ready for the rest of the journey.
Very good. Good teamwork on the car metaphor too. Martin, can you add to it, or do you want to go a different direction?
Yeah, no, I think I'll just stay consistent to the line. So I think that, look, as you would with a GPS system, to know where you're going to get to and having that control. I think I did actually use this analogy in the last catch up, Michael, was, it is really difficult to drive through the rearview mirror. So having the ability to control and having the ability to actually see what's coming at you, I think is absolutely critical. And as Jane said, the work here that's been done on the methodology through the AOM method provides that.
That's excellent. What a great way. I mean, you can tell you're a team because you think alike, or at least you can pick up the same thread and carry it on. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jane Pretty, Rosalie Spies, and Martin Hogg. You can find them all on LinkedIn, most likely, or you can go to the ActiveOps.com website, drop us a note, and we'll put you in touch with them as you need it. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, early in the morning for you guys, so I really appreciate you waking up early. This episode will be on AOTV, but along with other episodes, you can also go to ActiveOps.com and look at our resource hub to find information about our products, about our services that we talked about today, and as well as use cases and case studies, etc. And also, if you're interested in Capacity 22, please do hit our website or reach out to one of us, and we'll make sure that you get all the details and you can join the folks in Melbourne in late October, October 24th to be exact. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.